Hello, everyone, and welcome to Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves. I'm your host, Ike, and I'm here with John Betts. Say hello, Mr. Betts.
Hello, hello.
How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day and just hanging out, having a Sunday, nice little pancake breakfast and enjoying the weather.
What have you been putting on your pancakes today?
Oh, always good syrup. Can't be any of that corn syrup stuff. I have rum barrel aged Vermont syrup that was very good.
That is the biggest syrup flex I think I've ever seen in my whole entire life, and I'm about it.
Oh yeah, I just like to flex whenever I can, pretty much. It's just no reason not to, really.
In the gym, out of the gym, gotta flex.
All the time.
So you ready to get into the long form interview questions?
Absolutely, let's do it.
All right, first up, the old classic. What's your favorite dad joke?
Ooh, favorite dad joke. All right, well, can you tell me why don't seagulls fly over the bay?
No, I don't know why don't seagulls fly over the bay.
Because then they'd be bagels.
No!
Oh yeah,
Put in that zinger sound effect.
I've been telling that one since high school, and anybody who knows me will cringe because that's just true.
What's your favorite underutilized word in the English language?
So this is going to be a little bit meta, but I love the word sesquipedalian, which means a very long word. I personally like to use long words and sometimes get called out in, business emails or just like day-to-day meetings. People are like, what word did you just use? They're just fun. And so, yeah, I think people should use sesquipedalian words more often, including sesquipedalian.
Gotta love a word that makes reference to itself.
Oh, yeah. I'm all about the meta.
What movie will you never skip when channel surfing?
Ooh, it's pretty much any Bruce Willis movie, I think, be it Die Hard, Fifth Element, anything. Like I
Moonlighting?
love me. Oh yeah, anything. Like I love me some Yippee Melon Farmer, and just Fifth Element is gotta be like top Fifth Elements and top 5 movies for me of all time.
That's fantastic. Yippee-ki-yay, melon farmer.
Oh yeah,
Put
that's
that on a shirt. We gotta sell it.
Oh, I'm sure there are shirts. That was the TV dubbed version forever. You like anytime you were sick home from school in the 90s and you could manage to catch that movie, they would dub out the extra bad swears, and that's what they would replace it with.
I've heard mother trucker, but never melon farmer. Oh, that is.
Oh yeah.
That is top tier.
Classic.
So growing up, did you have a favorite book?
Yeah, I was pretty obsessed with like the entire Lord of the Rings series. Reread them multiple times. I feel like that's just pretty like cliche at this point. Now that there are like 6 movies out, and everybody and their mother knows all about Lord of the Rings lore. But yeah, I mean that was like my childhood obsession. I think like my dad read them to me way too young because they're talking about like slaughtering orcs,
Yeah.
and like there's a joke where they're like, oh yeah, they chopped off an orc's head and it rolled down a hill and into a hole, and thus was invented the game of golf. Yeah, like I was like my dad was reading that stuff to me when I was like, I don't know, 10, probably too young, but yeah, reread those a bunch of times when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the idea that we grew up around the same time period, and growing up and reading it then you were uncool, but you enjoyed it nonetheless because it was kind of one Lord of the Rings fantastic book series, but not only that, but it was kind of like your own little thing, like because not anybody else was really talking about it, nobody else was doing it, and so if you were in the know, it was kind of like this nice little secluded group. But now it's kind of like glasses have become, people wear glasses that have no lenses because it's cool now. But if you grew up in the 90s wearing glasses, you got picked on. And so those of us that grew up in the 90s wearing glasses and reading Lord of the Rings, it's like we're getting our niche taken away from us by popular culture. It's kind of it's beautiful because other people are getting exposed to it, but it is definitely kind of sad where it's like, oh, I used to be, this was my thing and now it's everybody's thing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like glasses and nerds are cool now, which it's I'm trying not to feel too much jealousy over that I had to grow up when like
Yeah,
you would just get teased
yeah,
relentlessly for wearing glasses
teased,
and
picked
being
on, made
obsessed
fun of.
with
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings. You know, now Harry Potter has glasses and he's like a sex icon,
Yeah.
Daniel Radcliffe, and you know, like glasses are cool, I suppose, and everybody loves Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and you know the new Dune movies coming out. Like those are all my like nerdy,
Yeah.
weird, you know, awkward jean short wearing childhood
Yeah,
moments.
you paid the price to have that
Oh
nerd
yeah.
cred, and now nobody's paying the price, and they're getting it. It's just like it's not fair.
Yeah, yeah, totally not fair. Like I either grew up 20 years too early, or just everybody else is, you know, getting to enjoy these things that are amazing and cultural icons for no price in terms of, you know, schoolyard bullying. But you know, if more people get to enjoy it, I guess that's cool.
It's fine. We're the
It's fine.
we're the metaphysical Jesus proxy in this situation. We paid the cost so you guys can enjoy it. You're welcome, I think is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, nerds of the 90s, you're welcome for our sacrifice.
So moving right along, if you could give up sight or two other senses, would you give up sight? If not, what two other senses would you give up?
I would have to give up sight. I'm a musician as like a part-time hobby, and that's just a huge part of my sort of like identity. And I feel like, you know, just taste and food so important. Smells obviously like linked in with you know taste
Mm-hmm.
and just eating generally. And so yeah, I mean, just the ability to hear is really really critical for me.
But how would you read
And
the sheet music if you couldn't see?
I mean, you can learn things by rote, and like you can. I mean, it would be very difficult to play in an ensemble, but you could at least still play.
Mm.
You know, like ensembles, you have to get a visual cue from a conductor typically. But you know, some things are done with click tracks now, where you just get a cue in your headphones, and that lets you know when you need to play,
Mm.
and you can just learn music by rote and then just memorize it. So it certainly would be infinitely more difficult, but the losing the ability to hear would be just devastating for me. So I'd have to go with sight.
Well put. Is there a best piece of advice you've gotten over the years? Or one that stands out
Oh,
as being best, I guess I should say?
yeah, this is gonna be totally kind of grim and like not polite in an American cultural context, but it is so huge. Companies have their own self-interests with which don't align with yours. And that's just true universally. Like, you
Mm.
know, I don't want this to come across as like some crazy, you know, anti-capitalist diatribe, but you know, sure, if you want to take it that way. But the biggest thing that I've had personal experiences with this and seen it time and time again. Companies, they're looking to make a profit. That is their purpose as an organization.
Mm.
And you know, you should therefore, as an individual, whether you're working for a company or buying products from a company, you need to have that same detached self-interest at heart. Because even if a company's like, oh hey, you know, we're one big family, we're all looking out for one another, no, you really got to look out for yourself and, you know, working overtime, like putting in extra, like above and beyond effort, you know, unless you're trying to like gun for some kind of a promotion or something, it's just oftentimes not worth it. So, and like, yeah, I've even had it happen where I've moved on to a different company, given my 2 weeks notice as like a courtesy because it was requested in the contract, like, hey, if you leave, please give us 2 weeks heads up,
Mm.
and then was immediately turned around and let go because California's a right to work state, so they can just do that. So
Yeah.
it sounds kind of a bit judgy and just kind of brutal, but yeah, companies don't have your best interests at heart. So if you're working for one, if you're buying stuff from one, like just take it with a huge grain of salt and look out for yourself. Don't try to, you know, do good for whatever organization you're working for. Like you gotta take care of yourself. You know, make
Yeah.
sure you're taking your own time off, not putting in too many hours, going to burn yourself out, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah.
it's a maybe a little bit frank, but I think very valuable.
Oh,
You know,
no, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
that's something I've seen time and time again talking to people who work for big businesses and just looking at the news headings and seeing what big businesses do to, their employees by and large.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a favorite life story, moment, or anecdote that you like to tell at a party?
Yeah, I do. So this will definitely be a little bit of a humble brag moment. But when I was in grad school, I did a summer internship for the U.S. State Department, which was an incredible experience, and I got to do a lot of cool things. Got to ride in like the armored, uh, you know, like sedan with like thick, anti-bullet glass and all sorts of crazy stuff. But one moment really stuck out to me that is just sort of a fun anecdote because it speaks to just the way that America portrays itself in the world. So this was a visit by the aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise, to the south of France.
Which,
They were.
by the way, if I might stop you, sweet name for a freaking plane.
Oh yeah, 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 absolutely.
Some Star Trek guy got in the State Department and was just wringing his hands gloriously.
Well, the Enterprise was, I think, the first nuclear aircraft carrier, and they call it like the Big E. So I think it's from I don't know what its commission date is. I want to say like the 1950s. I'm sure
Oh
some
wow,
listeners
so
out there.
it predated. So
Yeah,
it's the other
yeah,
way around.
yeah. The Star Trek Enterprise is named for the aircraft carrier
Oh
because
wow.
it's supposed to be like the Star Trek world is like meant to be kind of vaguely continuing a naval tradition in terms of like being a ship that you have like a military or exploratory ship. But yeah, the Enterprise is just a super cool aircraft carrier. It's absolutely massive, and they don't even make them that large anymore because it's just not that efficient.
Yeah.
And but so they were doing this like joint naval exercises, very publicized. Like they were landing French like fighters like Raphael onto the deck of the aircraft carrier and then launching them off again to show that like, hey, we're NATO, we have interoperable military parts. And so they did a big press conference and they just invited a ton of French press, a bunch of like dignitaries and all sorts of guests and things, like all the crew of the aircraft carrier like out on the lower deck. And the ambassador to France, who at the time was Craig Robert Stapleton, he was meant to give some remarks, and they just have like an empty podium off to the side, and you're like, huh, that's kind of weird. Like, I wonder how he's going to get there. And there's tables laid out, there's little hors d'oeuvres, people are sort of milling around, whatever. And then literally a full band starts playing music, and this dude, the ambassador to France, comes running, like ramping down on the vertical ramp that carries aircraft from the lower deck to the upper deck. It just comes slamming down at like 20 miles an hour, and he's just standing there looking like a badass with his arms crossed because he's just like, hello, yes, I am the American ambassador. And then he just struts up to the podium, and like that's just so indicative of like how U.S. conducts the United States conducts diplomacy. It was just like, yes, we are the badasses. Hello, we will make grand entrances and look badass doing it.
Yes, we are ballers. You are right to think we are the shit.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you could guarantee one of your dreams would come true, which one would it be?
That's real tough. I mean, I think that a lot of my dreams are very weird, but I really enjoy the idea of having some like global impact. Like if I could just like figure out a way to make food plentiful for people. Just I love eating. I'm a big like foodie person, and if I could just make it to where people are not hungry, that would be awesome. And I literally like have dreams about like a lot of zombie dreams and things where it's like people who are like hungry for food or they're like chasing me for food, like a lot of weird nightmares and things like that. So the antithesis to that is the dream of just getting people fed sort of universally, maybe like a golden rice, but
so
just
you
making
want
it more accessible.
So you want to be Thanos?
Well, that's not exactly the direction I was going, but if you could snap those fingers and
You've got the height for it. I think you could do it.
guarantee that 50% of people would never go hungry and there wouldn't be any war. Like, oh man, I'd have to give it a good long think.
Well, while you give it a long think, if you could work any of the jobs you've done over the course of your life, but get paid the same as the job where you made the most, which job would you work?
Oh man, that's that is a tough one. I've had some really good and some really bad jobs. I think um, working at a pool and like just getting to swim every day and like hanging out would be a pretty sweet job if I got paid what I get paid now. I was when I was a kid, I literally was a lifeguard for a local pool, which was super fun because on hot days I would just jump in every hour when I like called the break for the kids, and yeah, I just got to hang out, like read, go swim a bunch, and
Get a sweet tan.
just yeah, get a sweet tan and like chill out, and it was super fun. Not always so fun to occasionally be a lifeguard sitting on the deck in like 110-degree weather in the East Bay, but yeah, I mean it was just fun times, like fun people at a pool, like it's the same joke, like it's really hard to be in a super bad mood or have a frown if you're on a wave rider, and the same thing is kind of true for like people in a pool. Like if you're like goofing around and swimming, like you're probably having a good time. So people in pools are generally in a good mood.
What do you regret not having done or tried before you graduated high school?
Drum corps. Drum corps, absolutely drum corps. So I did music all the way from like elementary school. Eventually in undergrad, I did a bachelor's in music, play French horn, and I did not know that drum corps was a thing. I somehow just missed it, that it existed, and like now I've like seen these huge marching bands, and marching and drum corps are like two different things, somewhat related. My high school didn't march. We didn't have a football team, so there was not really any like actual marching, and I just was not aware that drum and bugle corps was a thing until I got to college, and then by that point I had basically aged out.
Yeah.
So yeah, like huge regret. Like I did go to like music camp over the summers, but I think I just would have had an absolute blast if I had spent my summers doing drum and bugle corps for some corps based out of the Bay Area. So yeah, probably like biggest regret from high school.
Yeah, it's hard to not watch the cheesy 2000s movie Drumline and not be inspired and like be like, that would be sweet to do.
Oh, it's so cool. Like I'm a brass player, I'm a horn player, and I always dreamt of like being on the snare line. Like it's just so glorious and so cool.
Oh yeah, you can't look. That is definitely one of the coolest instruments to play. Just intrinsically, like there's nobody that looks at that and goes lame. Like jock nerd doesn't matter. That's always awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, is there something that you're bad at that you'd like to be better at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty bad at like Japanese. I, people did all sorts of stuff in the pandemic where they're like, oh, I'm going to learn how to, bake sourdough, or I'm going to take up, cross stitch or whatever. And my thing was I started try to learn Japanese, just on like Duolingo and like random other places. I am so bad at it. I think I've learned like 200 words, and I'm sure that my accent is absolutely atrocious. But it's a fun language, and it's really interesting, and the characters are very difficult, but they're kind of doable. Like if you just sort of like bear down and do some memorization. So yeah, I mean, it would be super fun to just get better at that, or just any language in general. I sort of miss college for the foreign language courses that I took. That was a fun time. So,
but that's something that you're still pursuing to this day, slowly but surely, as it were.
Off and on, yes. Yeah, it's difficult because like you don't really get to like meaningful sentences where you can like actually interact until pretty late in the process. Because at least with a lot of programs, they start you with like learning characters and just basic words like cute or dog or whatever,
or cute dog,
which are kawaii inu. But yeah, like having meaningful interactions is just like so far down the line. So yeah, I still really suck, but would love to get better.
On the flip side of that coin, what are you terrible at but have no intention of improving at?
I am a very mediocre ping pong player, and I have like a lifelong rivalry with my brother, and I will sometimes play ping pong in the office, but the times that I've like signed up for actual ping pong tournaments, I just completely get my ass handed to me, and I I realized like, ooh, yeah, I'm not even like medium good. Like I can compete with my brother, but I am not good in any sense of the word to where like I would ever play at like a ping pong gym or try a
Yeah.
tournament or anything. And I'm kind of fine with that. Like that's just cool. I'm like, you know what? I'll be a mediocre ping pong player, have fun, pretend to have some trick shots with my brother, and that's just fine.
Totally. What's the most bizarre fact that you know for a fact to be true?
Bizarre fact. Uh, there's a. I would encourage you to actually do this. Anybody in the United States can apply the title of esquire to themselves because technically it is meaningless. It does not mean that you are a lawyer. It is has no official recognition or meaning in the United States as an actual recognized title.
It's just a fancy
So
honorific. That's all it is.
anybody who wants to be an esquire can tack it on your name and it's perfectly fine.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
thank you, Jonathan Betts, Esquire.
Thank you, thank you.
So you have a day with no obligations. What do you do with that day? There's nothing on the horizon. There's nothing that you've just gotten done with. It's just a day in a vacuum. What do you do with those 24 hours?
Oh yeah, I mean, I would be hard pressed to do anything but just draft Magic the Gathering. It's such a good way to spend a bunch of time, especially in a big block.
In person
Yeah.
or online?
Oh, I way prefer in-person paper play, but depending on where the pandemic is at any given point, sometimes you have to just play online. I do both quite a lot, but I for sure
Is there a
prefer the in-person paper.
oh,
Playing people in face to face.
is there a set that you would choose if it were your druthers?
Oh man, I love. Wow, man, that's a tough one. Probably Modern Horizons 1. That has got to be like an all-time favorite for me. Absolutely loved it. So much complexity, so much depth. Tons of different archetypes and just weird stuff that you could do. So I absolutely love that format and would play it basically infinitely.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad. I'm sure Watsy's grateful to hear that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, they keep their track record recently has been very good in terms of putting out good sets that are very strong for limited play. So yeah, I mean, I've been really enjoyed pretty much everything they've put out for the past like 3-4 years. Played Strixhaven just a massive amount up to Mythic on Magic Arena, so played it an excessive amount, let's say.
Awesome. Is there something that you wish you had started sooner that you currently do or did for a period of time?
Yeah, I mean, Magic falls into that category. Like, I came back to the game in 2012, and I feel like I would be both better and have more like depth and potentially like the further back you go in time with that game, the sort of the less sort of general knowledge there was, like like in the 90s, nobody had the internet, so nobody was good. Nobody knew how things actually worked, and it was just sort of easier to figure stuff out and like be good relative to the overall player base. So I feel like if I had stuck with it, like I played it as a kid, and then when I went to college, I just completely stopped. So if I had played through the 2000s, I probably would have, gone to a pro tour like way before I did, and potentially gotten just much deeper into the game, and it might have changed some career choices. So who knows?
So, what have you stopped that you wish you had ended sooner?
Buying IKEA furniture.
Why is that?
At a certain point, like I just had this moment where I was like, I think in my early 30s, and I was like, man, I keep having to like replace this furniture, or it's just wobbly or crappy, and there's no point to it. Like, I just sort of hit a point and I made a decision. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna buy like real furniture that I both don't have to assemble and that also is not going to fall apart in like 5 years. No more MDF, no more plywood. Like, just get real stuff that is actually going to last. So yeah, I just sort of hit a point where I was like, you know what? I'm an adult, damn it. I'm going to buy like real furniture.
If you could go back in time and tell yourself one sentence other than don't buy IKEA furniture, what would it be? And when would you tell yourself this?
It's so easy to just like, you know, go with the hey, go buy Bitcoin
Yeah.
joke, or you know, like for those magic nerds, the you know, go invest in reserve list cards. You
Yeah.
know, just buy all the dual lands you ever can. Back in the '90s, but I think if I actually had that opportunity, you know, a lot of, like, I've definitely had some difficulties just with like job stuff and relationship stuff, you know, normal life things that happen. Like, not everything is always good all the time, but there was definitely some points, probably in like my early adulthood life, right out of college, where I just could have used some reassurance to just say, you know, hey, things work out, just keep working, keep like enjoy yourself, but work hard, and things will work out. And I think that just sort of that reassurance would have really gone far. Because like when you're sort of new out of college, things are unsure. You know, your career, your job is like not good. Your relationships are not good. You know, it's just there are points where you have a lot of struggle, and having some sort of reassurance from a future self might go very, very far in that moment.
Totally. And before we take our first commercial break, if you could make sure listeners of this podcast heard one song, which would it be?
So this was very difficult for me as a musician myself. Had to really pare down this list, so I will give you just one. I think that it's important for me to both like represent local artists and also people that are doing new and interesting things, where they're sort of bending genres or they're doing like new forms of music, things that are like not easily put in a box. And for me, there's one group that's doing this really interestingly out of Oakland called Ensemble Micnawouge, and they have a song called First Song, which is incredible because it gives you a really good taste. You know, there's an awesome music video up on YouTube, but it gives you a really good taste of the fact that there's like this classic music ensemble, like part of an orchestra, and a hip hop MC being fused together for this like new genre, this new style. Is really interesting, really unique, and I think that it, you know, bridges a lot of barriers between things that are traditionally unrelated, and I think it's just a new direction that music may take in the future.
That's awesome. And how do you spell that?
Yeah, it's Ensemble Micnawouge, spelled Miknawouj. It's actually Juan Kim backwards, who is the founder and composer of the group.
That's awesome.
Who's apparently not very inventive when it comes to names, but his music is fantastic.
He saved his inventivity for his music. Very wise.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we're going to throw it to our first commercial break. And when we come back, we'll get onto the main passions and peeves. So listen to the ad or take a listen to Ensemble Micnawouge and come on back. Do you ever find yourself doing a mundane activity with nothing to keep you from gouging your eyes out or sticking a pencil through one ear and out the other? Uh-huh. Well, then perhaps I could introduce you to music. Music comes in a variety of different types, flavors, and colors. Theorists say that it's the best thing to introduce to your life since food. So go out and get some and make your life just a little bit more bearable. And we're back. Thanks for either listening to Ensemble Micnawouge or our fine commercial break. So, Jonathan Betts, what is your passion?
My passion is pretty specific, and it's about making orchestral music accessible. I've mentioned sort of earlier in the podcast that, you know, I've been playing music since I was actually like 6 years old, played all the way through school, eventually did a bachelor's in music, still do a lot of musical theater and play with various orchestras. And one thing that really sticks out to me is that the practice and availability of orchestras is pretty exclusionary. You know, they're traditionally done in concert halls. You know, there's like dress code and attire. You see people in tuxedos. It's really expensive to get in. You know, it's like hard to get to places. Davies Symphony Hall in San Francisco, not exactly easy to get to. And it's traditionally put up behind a lot of these social barriers. So a lot of what I've noticed is that it just excludes people based on like socioeconomic status, based on availability, based on familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like, I want everybody to be able to participate, everybody to be able to be involved, and not just do things only because of tradition. Like, oh, we play, this era of composers exclusively because, that's when quote unquote music was at its best or whatever.
Yeah.
And I have a couple friends who make a joke very frequently, which is a lot of traditional orchestras are just dead white guy cover bands. And so, I work with a couple different groups that are sort of trying to change that. I'm actually on the a not official board, but like on an advisory board for a community orchestra called Awesome Orchestra, which is based out of Oakland, Berkeley area. That's been around for, I think like 8 years at this point, so quite a while. And the core mission of that group is to make music more accessible, specifically orchestral music. And that means playing in places that traditionally don't get orchestras playing music. Playing for audiences who don't typically get to listen to orchestral music, being open and available to anybody who wants to play, regardless of skill or ability, as long as they, have a desire and they want to play and they want to learn a part. So
you guys are like
that group.
You guys are like the Martin Luther of orchestral music, basically.
Yeah, we have yet to nail some grievances up on the door of Davies Symphony Hall, but we're coming for you. And not to be too blatantly self-promotional, but the website is awesomeorchestra.org. It's a nonprofit group. I don't make any money from it. I just volunteer. But it's really clear to me that the mission of that group really aligns with that, addressing that problem that I sort of noted, which is just accessibility.
Yeah.
So the group does, no cost, quote unquote, open sessions rather than like official performances. They play in non-traditional venues. They've played at like Sports Basement in Berkeley and like the Oakland Public Library like a bunch of times. And just getting foot traffic and being available to people who have maybe never seen an orchestra live before is, as a musician, absolutely thrilling. And, we invite people to come and play. We invite people back to come see subsequent performances. And the group does very different music selection. So the literature that the group plays is a lot focused on local composers, underrepresented groups that have traditionally not had access to a quote-unquote traditional concert hall. So, people of color, female composers, supporting those people that have traditionally also not had access to the group, but from the compositional side.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Like, it's I think it's got to be one of the only groups that's doing this sort of almost revolutionary approach to say, yeah, we want to be radically inclusive and address this accessibility issue, whether it's cost or place or familiarity or the type of music that's being played. The group has played a bunch of video game music. It's played a bunch of music with like a hip hop MC. We've done backing tracks for like rock groups. So the genres and the styles are like all over the board. And to me, it's like much, much more interesting than the traditional dead white guy cover band.
So how did you get like introduced to this, like, not, I guess let's kind of rewind to the beginning. When did Jonathan Betts get introduced to classical, or what? Trying to typify this a little bit more than maybe I should. But when did you get involved? When did music become a part of your life, I guess is a better way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I started playing piano at like the age of 6. My family went on a family vacation, and there were some of my dad's friends' kids who were about me and my brother's age, and one of them played the piano and showed me how to really quickly do it. And we played, I don't know, like Mary Had a Little Lamb or something. But then also we were just sort of noodling around on the piano. And I literally had this epiphany moment at 6 years old where I said, whoa, I can like make my own music. It doesn't just have to be like music that already exists. I can do whatever I want. And so we got home from that family vacation, and I demanded piano lessons. And my parents were like, "Are you sure? Oh, okay, fine, whatever you want." So yeah, I started on piano at age 6, and then played all the way through elementary, middle school. Eventually picked up French horn, and then that led me to orchestral music, which I did, all throughout middle school, high school, college, and beyond. And that's really been a big passion of mine. But it to go to a music conservatory for a college degree, that costs a lot of money. And the field and the art itself is very often gate kept in terms of what is good and what is like deemed worthy of playing. So it's definitely been a lifelong pursuit, and something that I've been sort of in and involved with since orchestral music specifically, probably since middle school, I think.
So, how did you make the transition from piano to French horn? Was it, ooh, that instrument looks cool, it sounds cool, was the teacher like, we need, somebody on French horn, are you willing to learn? Like, how did that come about?
So, not to be too brusque, but my piano teacher died.
Oh,
Like, literally, I mean, she it wasn't like sudden. She was an older teacher who, I think when she passed, she was 92. Very sweet lady. And I just was not able to take any more piano lessons. And I was like, I think I'd been taking piano lessons for a few years at the time. I was like maybe 8 or 9. And I was like, no, I'm done with piano. I didn't want to really continue at that point.
was
And
it because
also,
of the teacher? Like, you felt like that was kind of your piano teacher and you didn't want another one? Or you kind of over the instrument?
I mean, a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Like 6-year-olds don't have great motivation to like sit down and practice unless,
Yeah.
there's some kind of like weird child prodigy, which I was definitely not. So yeah, I think it was a combination of both things. Like I didn't want to get a new teacher. I was probably a little bit over the instrument. Piano is really hard. I mean, not
It
that
is really
French
hard.
horn is also not incredibly
Yeah, also
difficult.
very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was playing, or I was about to join the 6th grade band, and you have to play, a band instrument in order to play. Like the teacher did not have need for a piano player, so I think I went home over a Christmas break, picked it up, learned just enough of the basics to like play really poorly, and then just came back playing horn and just picking it up as much as I could. So
Was your family musical? Did you just have one lying around, or how does one like one? Why does one pick up the French horn? Like I
yeah. Yeah, all great questions. So yeah, my family actually is very musical. Long sort of tradition of music in my family. My grandmother went to Eastman Conservatory. Both of my parents met in music school at Santa Barbara. Both my parents are vocalists, and they both also played instruments. But my father played French horn in high school, and so he still had one lying around. So that was definitely part of it. It was
yeah.
like my band teacher was like, "Hey, I don't really need a pianist. I don't need a flautist. I know you can do both those things, but what I really need is a French horn player," which is true of anybody. Like if
Yeah.
you want a college scholarship, pick up French horn because everybody needs one who is competent. And so she said, hey, I need a French horn player. And in the back of my mind, I was like, huh, that's weird. That sounds familiar. Maybe, like, I don't know why I'm familiar with that, but turns out my dad had one. And then I ended up playing that instrument all the way through college, like his French horn. So just kind of got quite lucky. Things lined up, and it was enough of a challenge where I felt like I was never going to master the thing, and still feel that way. And it's just always challenging me to do better, to figure out how to wrangle the thing. So
That's awesome. So what's when you're talking about like old dead white guy cover bands, which love that name and that kind of like a personification of that music. Do you still enjoy it, or is it what other than the fact that there's a lot of gatekeeping involved? is the problem with the music itself, like it's not actually very good and kind of lauded more than it should? Do you think it's overplayed? Like is it one of those things that if all music was as accessible and as kind of played as all the others, it would be fine, but it's the fact that it kind of takes over a genre more than it should? What's your, other than the gatekeeping, what are your gripes with it, I guess I mean to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a really interesting cultural moment because, especially in America, like we're finally having this reckoning to be like, well, there's so many things that were assumed, the preeminence of like Western European culture and, all the racial biases and like ethnocentric biases that are a part of that. It's we're definitely at an interesting moment because finally, as a culture and as a people, we're sort of being a little bit more introspective to say, here's how it's been, and what, like, can we actually reflect on this finally? And it's tied in quite tightly with Western classical art music, which people call, or like Western, orchestral art music, which people call classical music, but it's very sort of ethnocentric in a Western European sense to say that, because all cultures have music.
Yeah.
And so it's we're at this cultural reckoning moment, so it's really interesting to take a step back and think about it and talk about it. Now, I have to say, like, I do still love dead white guy composer music. And like, that's what I was raised on. Like when I played in orchestras in middle school, high school, college, like that was what we were taught. That was what we learned. That was what was like lauded as like, music worthy of being played.
Yeah.
And like all those other things, African music tradition, Indian music tradition, any other cultural that wasn't Western European, it was sort of deemed worthy of study, but only on the periphery, only
Yeah.
as like sort of a quaint, like, oh, you're an ethnomusicologist. Like, yeah, you have some weird, quirky subfield of music theory or like music,
That very much
music history.
That grandmotherly, oh, isn't that nice kind
Yeah.
of remark when brought up or talked about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, for me, it's difficult because I have a lot of internal conflict around this. Like, I love playing Brahms. I love playing like any Mahler symphony ever. It's just so much fun. It's huge and bombastic and amazing. I love that stuff to death. But at the same time, like a lot of those composers had, very difficult. I mean, I don't even want to get into, Wagnerian narrative, and there's just some very troubling beliefs and practices that they had, just as fraught as world history itself. That's all expressed in the way that composers like wrote their music and like what was deemed good and what was deemed worthy and all those sorts of things. So it's really, really intrinsically tied in all of these same types of large historical trends. But at the same time, I love that music. So it's really hard for me. Like, I want to play new stuff. I want to play things from like local composers. I want to play things from composers that are traditionally from underrepresented groups. But at the same time, I love those dead white guy composers too. So I've definitely torn internally, and I try to really, balance both and say this is what I was raised on and that's okay, and like this is still good, but like let's look at new stuff, like let's take a moment of introspection and say, can we do something different? Like, can SF Symphony play something from a local composer, person of color, rather than just the same Mendelssohn, Mozart symphonies that they've been playing for the last 100 years?
The problem is with the exposure rate, not with the product. It's the fact that we're, as a society, as a Western society, we are shown only X as opposed to the rest of the alphabet. And then the rest of the alphabet is like, well, it's not X. It's like, yeah, no shit, it's not X. It's, A and C and W. And that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, familiarity and exposure is a huge part of that. And it does come back to that gatekeeping question. Access is a huge issue. Having access to instruments, having access to music education, and having that music education be broader than just, oh, this is what they did in Western Europe. Those are all still current challenges in the field of music writ large. I think a lot of, like, we're seeing some sort of a change, and I'm going to pull in some, like, weird pop cultural elements here, But like, if you look at the composer who did the soundtracks for The Mandalorian, or if you look at the composer for like the new Dune movie, it's really interesting because they're beginning to take a more open and like open-ended and broader approach to how they write like film scores or TV scores or just scores in general. And they're moving away from like a Western orchestra where it's like, oh, I mean, Denis Villeneuve actually made this joke, like everywhere that he saw that was like doing sci-fi or fantasy, like, oh, in a galaxy far, far and away, but they still have cellos. Like,
They all have the exact same like.
Yeah, they all have the
musical
same
setup.
like. They all have the same, violins, cellos, basses. Like, yeah, it's all the same orchestra, no matter whether you're in like Star Wars Galaxy or Dune. So like film directors, TV directors, they're starting to move away from that and saying like, can we fabricate new instruments? Can we use traditional instruments, whether that's wind instruments which are not traditionally in a quote unquote Western orchestra, or relying really heavily on the voice, because voice is like truly universal across all human culture. Like everybody sings. So I think that that's really interesting, an interesting trend that you're seeing, that are like, it's starting to buck that history where they're breaking down the traditional Western orchestra. Like, yeah, not every galaxy far, far away is going to have cellos in it. And that's a new trend, over probably like the last 10 years. And like the composer, I forget the guy's name now, but the composer for The Mandalorian literally wanted to create these sort of like tribal sounding but completely fabricated instruments in order to evoke that sense of sort of mystery and being on the frontier and like the unknown. So,
Oh, that's awesome. So
yeah.
So before we leave this segment, I got two follow-up questions for you. What's the biggest misconception about your passion of, music, or especially orchestral music, by the wider world?
Yeah, I think in terms of misconceptions around accessibility, people will misascribe access for interest. People, if given a chance, will listen to what they're presented with. Like if you're presented orchestral music at 4 years old, you're going to be entranced no matter what your ethnic background is, no matter what country you're from, no matter, what your socioeconomic status is. It's exposure. So people, I think, really say, well, like, oh, it's a limited art form. It's, not the entire population is interested in it. And I think that that's sort of wrong-headed. It's that people aren't exposed to it. I think there's so much value in live music, especially like live instrumental music. There's still so much room left to express. And we can do that in exposing people earlier, more often, making it more accessible, changing what the quote-unquote assumed structure of an orchestra is, breaking that down, making it more interesting for more modern audiences. So I think I would really just distill it down that, not to confuse interest with access, because really, as somebody sort of inside the beltway of classical, quote unquote classical music, it's really more about just giving people an opportunity to explore it, playing things that are relevant to them in their lives, and making it, more universal again, and not just replicating what was important to Western Europeans in the 18th century.
Yeah. And the last one I got for you is, if you could briefly explain your favorite non-obvious aspect to orchestral music.
Non-obvious aspect. I think that one of the something that is so hidden that you wouldn't really know unless you've like played in an orchestra yourself is that there are really weird and subtle differences in time that you can only sort of deal with or perceive or interact with when you're dealing with like a physically large group and you're trying to do something that is like temporally synced. Now that's like a really wordy way to say like there's just a time delay. If you're dealing with like a 120 piece orchestra and you're physically 90 feet away from another player on the other side of the orchestra, there is an audible difference in that sound. And that is why you need, the conductor up at the front in order to sort of direct traffic to say like, hey, I'm going to give you a downbeat with this stick at an arbitrary point in space, but I need everybody to play at that precise moment, because if you wait to listen for the person on the other side of the orchestra,
you're going to be behind.
It's going to sound a full like quarter second behind where it should be. And
I mean, it's basically light travels faster than sound, right? We're seeing like what we see is all light, and so like the guy, the person waving the baton is far more visible, and like the information goes to you quicker because you can't hear, and then also when you're hearing you have to make sense of it and then respond accordingly, and like that kind of time is like lost, right? If I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the sound only travels at like 760 miles an hour about, and that's like not that fast. So if you are I mean, if you're like
it makes you sound like
it
makes you sound like Usain Bolt when you say a sentence like that. Just 760 miles an hour. I mean, what is that really? Come on.
Yeah. I mean, I can play that in like just a half a second. But I mean, if you're in a huge orchestra, like it's a real issue because the magic sauce of an orchestra is that you are in this moment together, that you're playing together, that you are looking and listening for visual and auditory cues, so that you can play together, play in tune, play in time, like have similar timbre, build to specific effects together, whether you're going for like a strident loud effect or like a delicate soft effect. Like those things all take so much like patience and attention, and it's the hidden thing that is the difficulty is that potential for delay, so like it's just really interesting that if you're in a huge group and you're across the group, you have to trust the one person at the front to give you time, because you can't only rely on your sense of hearing in order to play accurately and play quote unquote in the ensemble. So it's sort of a weird hidden fact, but something that musicians deal with is like you have to both be very active listening and also ignoring to a certain degree. You can't say like, oh, I have to wait for to hear the bass note, because if you do, you'll be 0.2 seconds behind or whatever.
Yeah. You just very much reminded me of this story. My father is a preacher, and we grew up in the Bay Area, and he got the opportunity to do the opening prayer for the San Francisco Giants back in, I guess it would have been like 92 or something like that. And the one piece of advice his bishop gave him before going on the field was, don't wait to hear yourself, just go. And he didn't understand it. And so he goes out there, he's on a sound system, and he starts the prayer, and he can't hear anything. And so he waited. He didn't listen to his bishop as fully as he should, and waited. And then he heard himself. And it was like a second back, just because of, like, I mean, you're talking about 90 feet, and this is like hundreds of feet from the speaker to the mound, which is where he was. And so he realized, like, oh crap. And like, I don't think, sadly, there's a recording of it, but there's this like, takes like the first like stanza of this prayer, and then just like kind of looks with this like look in his eye of like what am I on? Like was about to say testing, and then just hears himself. It's like, oh shit, and like tried to catch up with himself. But like it's the exact thing what you're saying. Like you can't wait to hear it, and like because the amount of time it takes to get to you, and like all that is just like it is flabbergasting, and something that if you don't, if you're not, like you said, like a player in an orchestra where that, and to watch the conductor, like you're just gonna, it's something that is never going to be understood unless you're actively involved or listen to this podcast.
Yeah, well, and like there are interesting like human psychological tests that have been done to where you can completely undermine somebody's ability to speak just by repeating their own voice to them on a time delay. There's actually like YouTube videos that you can find of people replicating this at home, or you can replicate it at home yourself. If you literally just play back your own voice through your headphones and record the experience, you eventually will just start speaking gibberish that is totally unintelligible because you hearing your own voice is a like an instant feedback process. Like you were typically accustomed to hearing your own voice through your ears at the same time that you're speaking. And if you put that on a delay, it undermines that part of the brain that is used to hearing that feedback at an instant. And it basically, you cease to be able to speak English. So yeah, I mean, the stadium effect is a huge issue, and it exists at a stadium size scale as well as like down to an individual concert hall, like just across an orchestra. It's the same type of phenomenon. Like you need to be able to almost block that part of your brain out in order to be able to continue to speak successfully, or to, in the case of an orchestra, play your music, play your part.
That's fascinating. All right, well,
Yeah.
we're going to go from a passion, which almost sounds like a grievance, to a grievance. So what is your preposterous peeve, my friend?
My preposterous peeve is chipper morning people. Just can't stand them. Not a morning person. If I'm left to my own devices, I'll probably stay up till, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning, much to the chagrin of my wife. But, until I've had like a good couple cups of coffee, I'm just not functional. Don't have a very active brain early in the morning. It's actually funny. I do not retain memories the very first thing that I wake up. So this was an issue when I was in high school. My dad would come like wake me up and say, "Oh, we've got to go to high school," or like, and I would get home from school and he'd be like, "Hey, did you remember to do that important thing that I asked you to do?" And I would just say, "What? I don't know what you're talking about." And he's like, "I told you the very first thing you woke up." And for some reason, I don't know if it's something I should look into or just a somewhat, variation of normal, I do not retain memories when I first wake up in the morning. So if I have to encounter somebody who's like a just bright chipper person at a coffee shop or a coworker, oh my God, it's too much for me to handle, and I need you to like tone it down because I'm running at about like 5%. I cannot have you at like 110%.
So you would rather be flipped off in the morning than given the good morning? Is that...
Oh my God. If somebody gave me like a wry smile or like a smirk and just said like, "Here's your cup of coffee," and like flip me a bird with like, a grimace, I would love that. Like I would be so much happier than like, "Hello, good morning, sir. How can I blah 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 blah." Like if somebody was just like down on my level, just chill out, like, "Hey, clearly I need to like get through this cup of coffee before I can like get my caffeine addiction ramped back up for the day." Yeah, I would much prefer that.
It sounds like you need to go to a New York coffee shop as opposed to a California Bay Area coffee shop is your problem.
I mean, maybe. Although people recently have like been real dour in the Bay Area. Everybody's just
Much to your appreciation, I'm sure.
frowning all the time. Yeah, I'm loving it in the mornings. Like, oh, everyone's just as in shitty as mood as I am. First thing.
Perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Has this always been a thing for you, like growing up, where like even before you were doing coffee, when you were going to like school at like 8 or 9 a.m. or whatever, was that still a thing for you when you were getting up and just like your mom's like, "Have a good day at school," and just inside your head you're just like, "I hope you die." Like that...
yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's been a lifetime issue, and I mean, it's not even any exaggeration. Like my parents literally started giving me coffee in early high school because I was so not functional in the mornings. They were like, "Oh, okay, fine. You're like 14. This is maybe not good, but whatever. We need to give you coffee." And it was, especially an issue when I was like doing jazz band, because that was the like A period before classes started. So
Yeah.
jazz band would start at 7 in the morning, and eventually I had to give it up because it was too early for me to
wow.
function. I just couldn't do it.
So for some people,
yeah.
for some people, coffee's a fix. For you, it is literally a fix. For your...
Yeah, I had some missing piece of software in my body as like for my whole life, and coffee was the patch. Because like school at 7 in the morning, oh my God, I couldn't do it. And so I've been that way my entire life, and my parents were like, I blame them for my caffeine addiction, because they at the age of 14 were like, "Okay, yeah, you need to get your ass up. Like, fine, here, we'll give you coffee." So
were you sleeping a constant set of pretty like acceptable hours? It wasn't that you were just tired, or do you think some of that had to come into play? Because you said you like to stay up until like 3, 4 in the morning. Is the fact that you were going to jazz at 7? Were you staying up that late, or were you going to bed and getting plenty of sleep? Like,
Yeah,
how
not
much of this had to do with you were tired? Do you think at all?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because I've done some sort of self-experimentation on this, and I have some theories, and they're probably totally wrong and weird. But the in high school I was definitely not allowed to like stay up that late, and I would just be tired waking up that early no matter what. I mean, I'm naturally a night owl, but like I was like not allowed to stay up that late when I was like in middle school, high school. I have an interesting theory that it almost doesn't matter when I go to bed, it matters when I wake up. So like I can go to bed at like 1 a.m. or 3 a.m. and as long as I wake up at like 9:30 or 10, I'm kind of fine. But if I go to bed at like 10 p.m. and I have to wake up at 5 or 6, oof, I am dragging so hard. So I think it has more to do with like the psychological strain of like waking up early or like before the sun. And I think that like I have some sort of weird circadian rhythm where like my body doesn't want to work on a 24-hour clock. Like the times when I've when I was in school or was on a break or whatever, I would naturally be on like a 26-hour cycle. So I would like stay up later and later, 2 hours later every night, and to eventually where I would have to like flip my whole schedule and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to bed at like 4 p.m. because I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night again. And yeah, I mean, my body just stays on like a longer than a 24-hour clock if I let it.
So I think that I feel like the real experimentation, and this would take way too much time and money that's not worth it, would be to get yourself in a room that has no light and change the clock settings and have like an outside source
or just no clock. Or just no clock. Like,
or no clock,
have just a light switch, a source of food, and a bathroom, and just lock myself in a room for a week and see what happens. I've had that exact same thought. Like, what would happen if I had no clock and I was only relying on my sense of circadian rhythm to like dictate my wake-sleep cycles? I'm so curious to know what would happen.
The interesting one would be no clock, obviously. That one has empirical data. But the other flip side to that is having a clock that portrays different times and have it not be correct, but if you're removed from any sound or light from the outside, like how that affects you. Either way, that's fantastic. All right,
quite a bit of money just for like my own personal curiosity. So if I ever end up with like that Bezos stupid amount of I can create a space penis for whatever reason.
Instead of creating a space penis, you're going to create a room like to lock yourself in that has a clock or no clock that sets certain times.
Just to answer this question, yep.
Hey man, it's probably going to yield more important results than a flying space penis around the.
Maybe.
Definitely cheaper. All right, and with that fascinating bit of conversation, we're going to throw it to our second commercial break, and we'll be right back after this. So stick around or come back or whatever. Having trouble staying awake?
Oh, yeah.
Wish you'd followed your dream so you had the give a crap necessary to meet your deadlines?
Oh, definitely.
Are you likely to be fired the second another warm body walks through that door and asks your boss for an application?
Probably.
Would you prefer to keep this shit sack of a job instead of explaining to Susan that you've been fired?
I mean, I guess.
Well then, let me introduce you to caffeine. Caffeine is a highly addictive substance that'll keep you jittery and energized to do any fucking stupid task for hours.
That sounds like drugs.
It is!
Aren't drugs illegal?
Not this one. So next time you feel like sitting on the sidewalk instead of at your desk, reach for a caffeine.
Wait, you didn't tell me where I can buy it.
'Cause it's mother-loving everywhere, you blind Neanderthal. And welcome back, folks. Thank you very much for returning. Jonathan Betts, are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, let's get electrified.
Did you ever cheat on a test in school?
Not myself, but I probably helped friends by grading their tests correctly when they weren't.
Lions, tigers, or bears?
Bears scare the hell out of me, so let's go with lions.
Favorite dollar menu item?
Ooh, 2 tacos.
Caffeine or alcohol?
Both? Yeah, both.
Are hot dog sandwiches?
Hell yeah, Ruth Bader Ginsburg says so, therefore it must be.
Bow tie or suspenders?
Both again, but more bow tie.
First R-rated movie you ever saw?
Ooh, I think I snuck into, against my parents' wishes, Beavis and Butthead Do America, and I still feel guilty about that.
Biggest celebrity crush?
Natalie Portman before any of the terrible Star Wars things?
Throw hands or talk shit?
Talk shit, for sure.
Is there a god?
Absolutely not.
Neapolitan or Spumoni?
Ooh, Spumoni.
Are we alone in the universe?
No chance. Way too big for us to be alone.
Pineapple on pizza or fist fight?
Hell yeah, pineapple. Let's throw down.
What or how much was the most expensive meal you've ever had?
I think I ate at like a one Michelin star restaurant once, which was like $400 for two people. Oof.
If you had the power to see the future but couldn't change it, would you use it?
Oh God. I mean, if we were talking about torture offline, I think that would just be a form of torturing yourself.
Red or blue?
Blue.
For $500,000, how long would you give up your passion?
Never. Not at all. Not a single second.
Shakira's voice in Danny DeVito's body or Danny DeVito's voice in Shakira's body?
So anyway, it started blasting. Yeah, probably Shakira and Danny DeVito's body, because that's just too funny.
Wine or beer?
Beer, obviously.
Over or under?
Over.
And what yes or no lightning round question would you like to ask me and have added to future lightning round questions?
What's the one thing you would grab out of your house if you had to evacuate it?
Magic cards.
Ditto.
All right. That concludes the lightning round.
Well, that was electrifying as expected.
Thank you very much to my editor, Richard Asford, and for scoring Joshua Gibbons, and my guest, Jonathan Betts. Anything you want to plug, recommend, places people could find you or your content?
Yeah, check out awesomeorchestra.org. That's the community orchestra that I'm on the board for. The group does new performances, i.e. open sessions, just about every single month. They're starting to do in-person performances again as of July 2021, so things are coming back. You can find us in like the Berkeley, Oakland, sometimes San Francisco area. That's probably one of the biggest groups that I'm involved in. And other than that, I can be found at Jonathan E. Betts on Twitter, where I don't really post things, but will probably start posting things more.
All right, thank you everybody for listening at home or wherever you found the time to appreciate this. And if you want to listen more, you can find more episodes put out every Monday on SoundCloud at Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves, or on YouTube at Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves Podcast, all one word. And remember, folks, don't take selfies with polar bears. They're really shy and, also ultra violent. Have a great day.